Here we go, we're doing it. I want to let you know how to deal with eastern exposed rooms in your home. Maybe deal with is the wrong way of putting it because there's nothing inherently wrong about having one exposure direction versus another, but it's important to realize that the colors you pick, as well as the overall design you're going for, will be impacted one way or another depending on whether your rooms are north, south, east, or west facing. What I want to go over in this video is quickly talk about how eastern facing rooms tend to behave, what are some common things to look out for, and ultimately, I'll guide you through some color examples that I would recommend as a starting point for some of you. Keep in mind, when I'm recommending colors, it's merely as an example of what could work, not necessarily ones that you should immediately go and throw on your walls. The goal here is to empower you to understand how to best use an eastern exposure to your advantage. If that sounds divine, then a like would be most fine. When we're talking about east-facing light, that means your room, or more specifically your main windows of that room, are facing towards the east. And it's no mystery that the sun rises in the east because of the good old rotation of the earth. So that will already tell you what you can expect with an eastern exposure. You'll get a strong dose of sunlight in the morning. This is probably my favorite part of eastern exposure rooms because it really does revitalize me after a long sleep. Almost to the point where I don't need a double espresso to get my day going. Maybe just a single one. So the interesting thing about direct sunlight in the morning is, just like us, it eases into the day, where it won't all of a sudden make your room feel mega bright like an orange inferno. It's a slightly subdued amount of warmth that'll amplify any warm tones in your paint colors. So basically, any grays might look a little more grayish. Morning light is going to feel warm but not fiery, and it's definitely going to brighten up the space as we progress to the early afternoon, right around that lunchtime. And that's where the warm aspect of your eastern exposure will begin to neutralize a bit. Although your room should feel quite bright at this point, but it's not necessarily going to feel as warm or yellowy. When you have a ton of light coming in, you do run the risk of having lighter colors feel what we call washed out. And that's where the visible hue, or more specifically the saturation of your paint colors, won't be as prominent. That beautiful light seafoam green you covet can end up looking just like a plain old off-white when bombarded with light, and that happens a lot at around noon. As time goes on throughout the day, however, the trend continues from warm to neutral to cool, and it's not as if your paint colors are going to all of a sudden change to blue, but they will tone down a bit and appear a little more gray leaning than they did earlier on. This might scare some of you, but don't worry. After sunset, it really doesn't matter what exposure you're working with because there's no sun. So how do we go about navigating these changing lighting conditions? Is there a magical paint that has chameleon-like qualities and automatically tweaks its saturation and undertones based on the time of day? Well, not at the moment, but I'm currently registering a trademark, so I'll keep you all posted. No, I'm just kidding. The reality is you have to make a decision at one point or another and just pick a color that's going to work best under all the different conditions throughout the day. Colors are meant to live and breathe and adjust, but that doesn't make the color selection process any easier for all of you. I get it. If you are a person that struggles with your eastern exposed room, here's a tip I'll give you. Think about how you use that room, and more specifically, when you use it. If it's a bedroom, you're more likely going to concern yourself with the morning lighting because most of us will be in our bedroom in the morning. Also in the evening, but that doesn't really matter in this case because no sunlight. So in that case, you want to be picking colors that react nicely to brighter, warmer lighting. And this gives you lots of options because even if you pick a slightly cooler color like Wickham Gray, for example, it's going to feel way more balanced and the cool properties of it are going to get settled down a bit. Or picking a color like Plaster of Paris will warm up even more and display more of its creamy quality. In the afternoon, when the light starts to become white rather than more creamy and yellow, that same Wickham Gray might show a bit more of its cool aspect, which is something worth noting. But the bigger thing to consider is how washed out it might appear. There's going to be a lot more light in the space, and then Wickham Gray will just sort of feel a little more bland, like we talked about earlier. It's going to get washed out. So you might want to consider getting something with a lower LRV like Stonington Gray that shares some of those cool gray aspects but has more depth to it. Just remember that Eastern exposed rooms midday will make colors feel a bit less saturated and grayed out. So that's for rooms that you spend a lot of time in the room midday. But then finally the afternoon will hit you and your colors will slip further towards the cool side of things, as your home should now be fairly shaded for the most part. So now what starts to happen is colors will get even cooler, but then your lighter colors will start to come back to life. You no longer have that intense sunlight drowning your colors in UV rays. From my perspective, in your Eastern exposed room, if you're going to be spending a lot of your time in the late afternoon, try to avoid very dark colors because you want to introduce more light to compensate for the fact that the sun is already on the other side of your house. You don't necessarily need to go too warm because there are lots of people that enjoy the soothing cool aspects of blues and purples. These are by no means rules, they're just things to consider. Let me know if it'll benefit all of you to curate a list of some Eastern exposure wall colors that I can talk about on a future video. And we're definitely gonna do more videos like this, so comment below if you wanna see west, south, or north exposures next. See you in the next one.